I never thought a charity ball would change my life forever. One moment I was standing quietly in my borrowed dress, the next I was humiliated in front of everyone. But what happened after that slap? Well, let me tell you how a billionaire's intervention turned my world upside down. Stay with me because this story proves that sometimes our lowest moments become the doorway to our greatest transformations. You won't believe what happens next. Hi, I'm Sophie. I know my story might sound like something out of a movie, but I promise you, every word is true. 6 months ago, I was just another face in the crowd. A kindergarten teacher who lived paycheck to paycheck, spending more on my students' art supplies than on my own clothes. I had this tiny apartment with a leaky faucet and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, but it was home. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every morning I'd wake up excited to see those little faces light up when I'd pull out new crayons or stickers I'd bought with my grocery money. That's just who I was. I'd rather see a child smile than have a fancy dinner. My colleagues used to tease me about it, saying I cared too much, but I couldn't help myself. Those kids deserved every chance I could give them. Then there was Daniel. We'd been married for 3 years, and I thought we were building something together. He was charming when we first met, told me he loved how genuine I was, how I wasn't like other women who only cared about money and status. But somewhere along the way, that genuineness he claimed to love became the very thing that drove him away. He started making comments about my clothes, my car, how I never wanted to go to expensive restaurants. The final blow came when he told me he was leaving, not for just anyone, but for Rebecca, his ex-girlfriend who'd come back into town with her trust fund and designer everything. "She understands ambition," he said when he packed his bags. Those words still sting, as if caring for children and living within my means meant I had no ambition, as if love should be measured by the zeros in your bank account. 3 months after the divorce, I was still picking up the pieces when my friend Lisa called me with an idea that terrified me. Lisa worked for an upscale catering company, the kind that served champagne that cost more than my monthly rent. She'd been assigned to work the annual Children's Foundation Ball, one of those events where the city's elite gather to write big checks and feel good about themselves. "Sophie, you have to come as my +1, she insisted over coffee at our usual diner. "The theme is children's education. This is literally what you live and breathe every day." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Lisa, are you insane? I can't go to something like that. I don't have the right clothes, the right anything. I'll stick out like a sore thumb." But Lisa wouldn't take no for an answer. She showed me pictures from last year's event. Crystal chandeliers, women in gowns that probably cost more than my car, men in perfectly tailored tuxedos. It looked like another world, one where I definitely didn't belong. "That's exactly why you need to be there," she said, leaning forward with that determined look I knew too well. "These people write checks, but you actually change lives. You deserve to be in that room more than half of them." Against my better judgment, I found myself saying yes. Lisa was so excited she practically dragged me to her apartment that very afternoon, pulling out a midnight blue dress she'd worn to her cousin's wedding. It was simple but elegant, the kind of dress that would let me blend into the background, which was exactly what I wanted. Standing in front of her mirror, I barely recognized myself. The dress fit perfectly, but I felt like I was playing dress-up. My hands were shaking as I tried to imagine walking into a room full of people who belonged to a world I'd only seen in magazines. The night of the ball, I must have changed my mind a dozen times before Lisa picked me up. When we pulled up to the Grand Millennium Hotel, my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The entrance was lined with luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, even a few Bentleys. I felt like a fraud stepping out of Lisa's Honda Civic. Walking through those massive doors was like entering a fairy tale. The ballroom was absolutely breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers casting warm light over everything, tables draped in cream silk, and flowers that probably cost more than I made in a week. The guests looked like they'd stepped off the pages of a fashion magazine. Women glided by in designer gowns, their jewelry catching the light, while men in expensive suits chatted casually about stock prices and vacation homes. I tried to make myself invisible, staying close to the walls, observing rather than participating. That's when I noticed the displays around the room. Information about the Children's Foundation and their mission to provide educational resources to underprivileged schools. My heart started racing for a different reason. This wasn't just some social event. They were raising money for kids who needed exactly what I tried to provide with my own limited resources. I found myself reading every display, every statistic about children who went without basic school supplies, who attended schools with outdated textbooks and broken equipment. These were my kids. Not literally, but kids just like the ones I taught every day. For the first time that evening, I felt like I belonged somewhere in that room, even if it was just standing next to those displays. I was so absorbed in reading about a program that provided art supplies to rural schools when I heard a laugh that made my blood run cold. I'd know that laugh anywhere. It was Daniel's. I turned slowly, and there he was across the room, looking more polished than I'd ever seen him in a perfectly fitted tuxedo. But it wasn't Daniel that made my stomach drop. It was the woman beside him. Rebecca was everything I wasn't and everything I'd never be. She looked like she'd been carved from marble and dressed by angels. Her red dress probably cost more than my yearly salary, and the diamonds around her neck caught the light like captured stars. She was laughing at something Daniel had said, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his arm with casual ownership. I should have looked away. I should have found Lisa and asked to leave right then, but I couldn't move. I watched them move through the crowd like they owned the place, which, given Rebecca's family money, they probably did. Daniel looked happier than I'd seen him in the last year of our marriage, and that hurt more than I expected. I tried to duck behind one of the silent auction tables, hoping to avoid them for the rest of the evening. But fate, it seems, had other plans. As I was studying a bidding sheet for a weekend getaway, trying to calculate if I could afford even the minimum bid for a good cause, I heard heels clicking on marble, getting closer and closer. When I looked up, Rebecca was standing right in front of me, and the look in her eyes told me this wasn't going to be a friendly reunion. Well, 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 look what the cat dragged in. Rebecca's voice was honey-sweet with poison underneath. She looked me up and down like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. Sophie, isn't it? Daniel's... what should I call you? His starter wife? I felt my cheeks burn, but I kept my voice steady. Hello, Rebecca. I'm just here supporting the Children's Foundation. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, how noble of you, playing dress-up for the evening? Her eyes zeroed in on my borrowed dress, and somehow she knew. Tell me, how exactly does a kindergarten teacher afford a ticket to an event like this? Did you have to save up your lunch money? People around us were starting to stare, their conversations quieting as they sensed drama brewing. I wanted to disappear, but something inside me refused to be humiliated without standing up for myself. I care about children's education, I said quietly. I thought that's what tonight was about. How touching, she sneered, moving closer, playing the saint routine that fooled poor Daniel for so long. Rebecca's voice got louder, more theatrical. She was putting on a show now, and I was her unwilling co-star. You know, I should thank you, Sophie. If you hadn't been so adequate, Daniel might never have realized what he was missing. A man like him needs a woman who can match his ambitions, not someone who thinks buying crayons is an investment strategy. The words hit like physical blows. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. Daniel told me how you held him back, she continued, her voice carrying across the ballroom. How you made him feel guilty for wanting more than your little teacher's salary could provide. How exhausting it must have been, pretending to love someone so ordinary. That's when something inside me snapped. You don't know anything about love, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Love isn't about what someone can buy you, it's about... The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. The crack echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom like a gunshot. My cheek burned, and I could taste blood where my teeth cut my lip. The entire room fell into complete silence. Hundreds of eyes focused on me standing there with tears finally spilling down my face. Rebecca looked satisfied, like she'd just won some twisted game. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, commanding. The crowd seemed to part automatically, and through my tears, I saw a man walking toward us. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair and the kind of presence that demanded attention without asking for it. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, but it was his eyes that caught me. They were sharp, intelligent, and right now, they were absolutely furious. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was quiet, but it carried across the room like he owned the air itself. Rebecca's entire demeanor changed instantly. Her cruel smile transformed into something sweet and innocent. "Oh, Mr. Cross, Nathan, we were just having a little chat with Daniel's ex-wife. Nothing serious." Nathan Cross. Even I knew that name. He was the tech billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing, the man whose foundation was sponsoring tonight's event. What was he doing here, walking toward our little drama? He ignored Rebecca completely and stepped directly to me. Up close, I could see the anger simmering in his dark eyes, but when he spoke to me, his voice was gentle. "Are you hurt?" He pulled a pristine white handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to me. His simple act of kindness almost broke me completely. I dabbed at my bleeding lip with his handkerchief, trying to find my voice. Nathan turned to face the crowd, and I've never seen a room full of powerful people look so uncomfortable. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "I've been watching this evening's events with great interest. I've seen people bid generously on auction items, heard passionate speeches about helping children, witnessed what appears to be a community coming together for a worthy cause." He paused, letting his words settle over the silent crowd. "I've also been watching this young woman." He gestured toward me, and I felt every eye in the room focus on me again. While others have been networking and socializing, she's spent her evening reading every single display about our foundation's work. She studied each program, each statistic, each story about the children we're trying to help. I could see Rebecca's face growing pale as Nathan continued. She bid on items not because they were prestigious, but because she understood their impact. I watched her calculate whether she could afford to contribute, not to be seen, but because she genuinely cares about our mission. Daniel appeared beside Rebecca, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "This woman represents everything our foundation stands for: selfless dedication to children's welfare. Yet she was just publicly humiliated for having the audacity to care more about substance than status." Nathan's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "You want to know why this matters to me personally? Because 30 years ago, I was one of those children our foundation helps today. I grew up in foster care, bounced between homes, attended schools where the textbooks were falling apart, and there were never enough supplies to go around." The crowd was hanging on his every word now. Even Rebecca had gone completely silent. I remember a teacher, Mrs. Peterson, who spent her own money to buy me notebooks and pencils. She saw potential in a kid everyone else had written off. That teacher changed my life, and I guarantee she made less in a year than some of you spend on a single vacation. He turned to look at me, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite identify. "I've been looking for someone to run my new educational foundation, someone who understands that real change happens one child at a time, not in boardrooms or galas. Someone who measures success not in profit margins, but in the light that comes into a child's eyes when they finally understand a concept." My heart was pounding. Where was this going? "Sophie," he said, using my name for the first time, "I'd like to offer you the position of Director of Educational Outreach for the Cross Foundation. The salary is $200,000 annually, plus benefits, plus a budget to implement any program you believe will help children." I felt the world tilt. $200,000? That was more than I'd ever dreamed of making. I could barely breathe, let alone speak. The ballroom erupted in whispers and murmurs. I stood there, still holding Nathan's blood-stained handkerchief, trying to process what had just happened. Rebecca looked like she'd been slapped herself, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Nathan," she started, her voice shaky, "surely you don't mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." His tone was ice-cold now. "And I think it's time for you and your companion to leave. Security will escort you out." Daniel finally found his voice. "Now wait just a minute. You can't just— Actually, I can. This is my event, my foundation, and my decision." Nathan raised his hand, and 2 security guards appeared as if from nowhere. "Please ensure Mr. and Ms." He paused, pretending not to remember their names. "These individuals find their way to the exit." As they were escorted away, Rebecca hissing something under her breath that I couldn't hear, the other guests began approaching me. These people who hadn't given me a second glance all evening were now introducing themselves, shaking my hand, congratulating me. It was surreal and overwhelming. Nathan stayed close, deflecting some of the attention when he saw I was getting overwhelmed. "She'll need some time to consider the offer," he told the crowd diplomatically. But I didn't need time. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, I accept." 6 months later, I barely recognize my life. I'm sitting in my new office. Actually, it's more like a beautiful workspace with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The Cross Foundation headquarters is nothing like the cramped teacher's lounge I'm used to. But the best part isn't the fancy office or even the salary that lets me live without constantly checking my bank balance. It's the work itself. In 6 months, we've launched 12 new programs. We've provided art supplies to over 200 schools, funded reading programs in underserved communities, and created scholarship funds for kids who remind me of Nathan's story, brilliant children who just need someone to believe in them. I still live modestly, but now it's by choice rather than necessity. Most of my salary goes right back into expanding our programs or into my personal fund for classroom supplies. Old habits die hard. Nathan and I work closely together, and I've discovered that beneath the billionaire exterior is someone who genuinely cares about making a difference. He's brilliant, driven, but also kind in ways that surprise me. Sometimes I catch him watching me with an expression I can't quite read, and I feel something flutter in my chest that I'm not ready to examine too closely. Looking back on that horrible night, I realize Rebecca's slap was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed being humiliated, that part still makes me cringe, but because it put me exactly where I needed to be at exactly the right moment. Sometimes life's cruelest moments are actually course corrections, pushing us towards something we never would have found on our own. That slap didn't just wake up the room, it woke up my own sense of worth. I learned that your value isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond when they try to diminish you. I learned that standing up for what you believe in, even when your voice shakes, is always worth it. And sometimes, just sometimes, there's someone watching who sees exactly who you really are. Sophie's story shows us that sometimes life's cruelest moments are actually redirecting us towards something beautiful. If you've ever felt invisible or undervalued, remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. Your breakthrough might be just one difficult moment away. What moment in your life seemed terrible but actually opened new doors? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove life always has surprises waiting for us.